ordered this height sensor yesterday. So I've just had a guy complaining that I'm blocking the road, and I just told him, look, the gearbox is gone. I thought I'd take the opportunity to take you through some of the things that I've learned ever since purchasing this Range Rover. It's now November. I purchased the car in April. I've jotted down a handful of notes that I thought I'd furnish you with in case you're looking to buy a Range Rover, if you're considering purchasing one of these risky buys, you know, where the car's no longer under warranty. It's a very expensive car, so hopefully I'll go through with you what some of the pitfalls have been, some of the pros, the cons, and hopefully it will allow you to determine if you have an appetite really for one of these wonderful vehicles. So I've been watching a YouTube channel called Overlanding with Bruce. He has one of the latest Land Rover Defenders, and he had gone overlanding in Botswana with his mates, and he ended up running out of fuel. And it was his mates really in a traditional Land Rover 110 that ended up rescuing him. So I realized then what is the most important aspect to a car for me personally, and that is range. So the hope is for me to go overlanding at some point. I'd also like to go out into the forest and spend 10-20 days at a time. So for me, the range of the vehicle is the most important. Obviously with a lot of the modern cars, especially the electrics, they've got a very limited range, so they're really good for city driving, but if you're looking to do what I'm looking to do, which is travel very long distances, going out into sort of the sticks 10-20 days at a time, diesel, and specifically the engine in this car and the efficiency that you get from the ZHP gearbox, which incidentally is in every modern car, so every modern BMW in 2023, every Audi, every Mercedes has exactly the same ZHP gearbox in this car. So the ZHP gearbox is in the Aston Martin, it's even in the Lamborghini Urus. So that's just how successful the transmission in this vehicle is, and I find that it's obviously a little bit more economical than the 3.6 TDV8, which is really why I went for this, even though there's a little bit too much technology in this car for my liking. I think it makes it a little bit more unreliable. So for me, that is number one. That's the most important aspect or feature of a car, the ability for me to go from Land's End to John O'Groats without stopping. So range is absolutely the most important priority. It's in fact a matter of life or death. Here in the UK, obviously, you can get rescued very easily. Worst case scenario, you can even get a helicopter come rescue you if you're in sort of a dire straits. But nobody's going to be saving you in Africa. Nobody's going to save you in a lot of these more remote places. If you get stuck, you're on your own. So to me, that has highlighted to me why the engine in this car will continue to be one of the best, because of the range, because you can take it to Africa and you can use dirty diesel not all the fuel that's available in Africa, for example, is as clean as what you get here in Europe. And so when you get if you take one of these modern diesels there, you're going to struggle because they really can't really process some of the less sort of clean diesel that you get in a lot of these remote areas. So that's really the main reason why I purchased this car. So the next reason is that it's repairable. So as you know, I spent around £13,000 on this car, getting it to where it is now. I spent £3,000 on an engine rebuild, and then there was a couple of peripherals where we needed a new front leg, and we also reconditioned one of the turbos. But the engine is rebuildable, you know. Unlike some BMW V8s, for example, where once you start taking that engine apart, it ain't going back together again. This engine is rebuildable, and it's also rebuildable affordably. This car has a Ford engine. It's a Ford 4.4 TDV8, and there are various flavors of Ford. You've got the 2.2, there's the 3.6, you've got this 4.4. I believe they've got even bigger models in America. But for us, that's sort of the biggest engine here in the United Kingdom, and it is absolutely terrific. As I've said, you can actually repair the engine affordably because the parts are going to be Ford parts. You know, the bearings that we had to replace and everything were Ford bearings. There weren't some high performance sort of bearings. So in general, when it comes to repairing the engine, it's both repairable and it's affordable. So another big win really for the TDV8. Now, why buy a big fuddy-duddy Range Rover? So if you'd asked me 10 or 15 years ago, I really would have been laughing. But the reality is we don't have the Autobahn here in the United Kingdom. We don't have the Nurguring. You've got sort of speed cameras pretty much everywhere. So you can't drive at speed. Most of the time during the week, it's congested anyway. So who really needs a fast car? So for me, I've kind of moved away from wanting an M5 or an M3 or an Audi RS, whatever. I still would get an RS8 though, if I had the opportunity. That's a beautiful, beautiful car. But in general, I believe that, one of these cars is probably going to be a lot more useful than an M5 that you can barely drive anywhere. As I've said, you've now got speed cameras pretty much everywhere you look, and it's not fun driving one of those cars where you just put your foot on the pedal too much and suddenly you're looking at losing your driver's license. So that's why I've chosen an older fuddy-duddy car really. So that's another reason why I've decided, as I say, to go for a big old Range Rover rather than an M5. The next item is really the emissions engineering has ruined most cars. I don't really agree with much of what's happened in the last 5 to 7 years. I believe that a bunch of non-engineers have gotten involved with what was an engineering project and tried to steer these projects in particular ways. For example, if you look at things like an EGR valve and exhaust gas recirculation, an engineer would have never come up with that. So there's a lot of really, really poor engineering that's happened recently, and all because people have been trying to meet these emissions. And as I said, a lot of very, very bad engineering, a lot of poor engineering has been introduced. And for me, I really believe in these engines. They're turbocharged, so if we're looking at the diesels from the 1990s, where in general, there wasn't that much turbocharging, those cars really did pollute. But this car at 2,000 revs is doing kind of 70 miles an hour with the turbos. It's the turbos that are providing most of the power. And in fact, if you look at most of the forced induction in all the modern cars from 2010, they are following the design of this engine. So I don't believe any of the emissions information that's come out. I think it's all just a load of codswallop, where, you know, people have basically taken a lot of wrong decisions. They were told that they shouldn't go in a particular way. They did, and really by around 2015, diesel had obviously become a pariah and had become something that people were maligning. But if you look at the wind turbines that people are looking to move to that are green, they are effectively a diesel generator. If you look at a lot of the electric cars, the fail-safe is diesel. And in fact, I'm hoping to help people that break down. So if you've got an electric car and you break down, you run out of charge, you're going to be able to give me a call and I'll be able to pick you up in my car and tow you. So the towing capabilities is also one of the main reasons I've gotten this car. Yeah, so in general, as I say, the emissions are a complete utter scandal. And none of the engineering that they've done really since about 2005 has made sense. So most mechanic shops really don't know how to do basic checks like compression tests and smoke tests. That's another thing that I've learned. I used to have a lot of faith in a lot of mechanic shops. But frankly, and I need to be very careful in case some of my mechanics watch this, I really recommend you learn how to fix your own cars. I really recommend you learn how to do some tasks on your car, because a lot of mechanics, frankly, they don't care. Yeah, they don't care about your car. They're not as passionate about your vehicle as you are. And a lot of them just do half-assed jobs. I've had a complete and utter nightmare. Yesterday, I ended up going to get a wheel height sensor fitted because the previous mechanic who had fixed the car gave the car back to me with more errors on the dashboard than it had when it went in. Yeah, as I'm saying, I'm learning as I go along. But finding a really good mechanic is probably the biggest battle that you'll have. If you can learn to do some of these jobs yourself as well, you're going to save yourself a ton of money and a lot of the concern. Because as I said, yesterday we managed to get the car up on the lift. I had been told that all the pipes had been done, all the brake pipes that had corrosion, and by all accounts they've only done one side and not the other side. And you know, I got charged nearly £2,000 for that. So absolutely livid. But this is the reality. So unless you're able to check the work that people say that they've done, you can also be taken for a ride. So I'll be taking this up with the mechanic that's concerned, but I'd highly recommend that you try and find yourself a good, honest mechanic and obviously use them as much as you can.
Last, now everybody go to breakfast. You go bow for the result, though. Nothing to discuss, though. Cause I take one by default and without any doubt, though. I'm a me happy adult, though. I no go feed the girl, I no go feed the girl, it's out, though. I'm a mind that's with the talk, oh. I put my life into my job and I know I'm in trouble. She manipulate my love, oh.
Cars on eBay, for example, are cheap for a reason. That's another thing that I've learned. That yeah, you're not really going to get that bargain. That elusive bargain is 1 in 100, not 1 in 10. If you go for anything that's really cheap on eBay, that's too good to be true, that's priced amazingly, you're going to find yourself having to resolve engine problems. So only pain really awaits you if you keep thinking that you're going to get a deal. As I said, I think it's more likely 1 in 100, if not 1 in 1,000, than 1 in 10. So yeah, I am going to try and move away really from bidding on these ridiculously cheap cars. to be honest, YouTube is more interested in the rags to riches. If I buy a broken down vehicle, you can actually create more content on it. But I wouldn't recommend to Joe Public to go out and buy trashed cars or run-down cars. You're far better off purchasing a car that's been looked after, that might be £1,000 or £2,000 more, rather than dealing with the headaches that I've been dealing with here. These cars are not cheap. They'll never ever be cheap, and unless you're discerning, you're going to find yourself broke, basically, because these cars will get rid of all your money in like that. They're very, very expensive cars. So yeah, don't go buying cheap Range Rovers if you can. Sort of avoid it. So the next thing, obviously, that I'd say that's tied to what I've just mentioned there is that the selling price of most cars is just overpriced. Most people sell their car for a price where it's just not worth it, and especially these Range Rovers, even the 7, 8, 9 grand ones, unless they've had all the shock absorbers doing, they've had all the air suspension replaced, they've had sort of an engine service, they've had the turbos done, they've had sort of EGR valves cleaned, they've had the main end bearings, the big end bearings done, they've had all the injectors cleaned and replaced, then you're going to have to spend tens of thousands on that car. So you need to be very, very careful and purchase the car for the right price. I purchased this for $2,500, so I'm over the moon. I'm cock-a-hoop there because I know I purchased a car for the right price. If you're purchasing one of these for 7, 8 grand and you're going to have to pay another 20 grand, they're not worth it. So it's very painful for a lot of Range Rover owners to really factor in that, you know, once these cars are over 10 years old, over 100,000 miles, they are going to need an absolute fortune spent on them. And unless you've been doing this maybe while the car's been under warranty, or been changing some of these items as the car has kind of aged along, yeah, don't overpay for these cars. Most of them are overpriced. In fact, I'd say this for most cars in general. That's what I've learnt. Yeah, people are just over optimistic about the value of their cars. They're not realistic about the true amount of money that's going to need to be spent to get these cars back to half decent shape. Avoid cars, yeah, that have been sat around for several years. I've got a BMW that I'll show you. I've got one at home. This is just nothing short of a nightmare. Now, I've heard this before from other mechanics, and I thought, oh, well, you know, I know better. But to be honest, you just end up with an unbelievable amount of items you need to fix. You end up needing to fix all the electronics, all the wires are rusted. You need to find somebody to rewire them. It's very expensive to do. You need to replace all the furniture, all the seats that smell of damp. Everything needs to be replaced, the radio, everything, all the electronics. You end up needing a donor car, really, to repair that car. So I would completely avoid purchasing a car that's been idle for more than 2 or 3 years. Once it gets to 7, 8 years, and it's been, especially in sort of the weather here, the British weather, run a country mile from that car. In fact, don't walk, run away from that car. The next item, the 9th item, is avoid buying cars that have been run into the ground. So for me, there really are 3 types of car owner and 3 types of car buyer. You've got the person that just does nothing. You've got the person that tries to keep up with everything, and then you've typically got the mechanic type that does his oil service every 6,000 miles. Now there are people, as I've said, like the previous owner of this car, that just ran it into the ground. Yeah, I believe that the engine problem was because the car didn't have enough oil, so that ended up being a £4,000 job to repair. And everything else, in terms of the suspension, the brake lines, you just end up with a ton of work to do because of poor ownership, or just, as I say, people not looking after a car. So not only should you avoid cars that have been idle for many years, but do not go, as I say, and purchase some of these very, very cheap cars that have been run into the ground. They're in fact the worst type of car to purchase. But as I say, for YouTube utility, yeah, it provides more content. So yeah, it's very good for YouTube content, but not very good for your wallet. So absolutely avoid cars that have been run into the ground. And the final item really is to deal with rust. I've already had the wheel arches rust proofed and repainted. Likewise, we've had the tailgate sorted out, and we're going to be having the underneath of the car sort of rust proofed as well. It's pointless having a Range Rover and just continuing to watch it deteriorate. You know, you might as well deal with the rust, because once the rust gets deep seated here in these arches, you know, you can almost never repair the car again. So there are known weak spots with this car. Try and find out what they are, and every 5 or so years take the car to a body shop and try and get them to keep on top of sort of any emerging sort of rust issues. This will really help you sell the car, because as I said, yeah, most cars, especially here in the UK, turn into rust buckets after about 10 or 15 years. If you're enjoying the content on this channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm.